Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Good afternoon, Cougar Nation. Welcome on into Cougar Sports Saturday. Mitch Harper here with you, coming to you live from downtown Salt Lake City at Broadcast House, talking some BYU sports over the next 3 hours on this final Saturday before Christmas. Hope all of you are having a fantastic holiday season. Feels like Christmas break is finally here now. Everyone's getting ready for a special time of the year. No one ever knows what day it is. Every day feels like a Saturday going forward the rest of the year. So excited to be part of your day, however you're celebrating right now over these next 3 hours. We got a loaded show for you today. We're going to be talking some of the college football playoff. 12-team playoff era is underway. SMU, Penn State, ugly game for SMU right now. We'll touch in on that. Also, BYU football transfer news, and we join coming up this hour live with BYU's newest tight end, Carson Ryan, who transferred in from the University of Utah. We'll get to know him and understand why he picked the Cougs. You'll also hear from BYU football safety Raider DeMooney as the Cougs are 1 week away from the Alamo Bowl against Colorado. They'll be leaving for San Antonio coming up on Christmas Eve. And we'll have BYU basketball talk as the Cougs took down Florida A&M in non-conference action last night at the Marriott Center. So much to unpack here on Cougar Sports Saturday, and you can always interact with the show, texting the program, 57500. But let's start things off a little bit with this new era in college football.
The starting lineup. A look at the stories making headlines right now. It's time for the starting lineup on Cougar Sports Saturday.
I'm not going to lie. It was kind of surreal last night when I saw the introductions. I was at the Marriott Center, and on my cell phone I had the Watch ESPN app going, and seeing a 12-team playoff home game at Notre Dame and Indiana, just that idea of a 12-team playoff happening in college football, it was surreal. And obviously Notre Dame just cruised to a comfortable victory, 27-17. But to think that we're in a 12-team playoff era, it's still kind of shocking a little bit to think that a college football national champion is going to be determined by a bracket. Now, the system's not completely perfect, and BYU, better than most, understands how this committee, the way they rank teams, is not a perfect system. You know, you get teams like BYU, they'd go from 6 all the way to 14 in a hurry. But it's still cool to see a bracket. And I bring all this up because after last night's performance between Notre Dame and Indiana, and right now, watching live, Penn State is up 28-0 early in the third quarter on SMU. The national conversation suddenly around college football is, well, SMU shouldn't have been in. Indiana should not have been in. Folks, why are we talking like this? Why are we saying that these teams didn't belong to be in? SMU, a really good football team, an 11-2 season. They earned their way in. They didn't lose to some 6-6 scrub Oklahoma team. They didn't drop the ball against a Vanderbilt like in the case of Alabama. Indiana dominated their opposition. The teams that were in front of them, they dominated those teams, and no one would say Indiana has a roster just filled with 5-star blue-chip talent. They exceeded expectations and did what they were asked to do and did a really good job, and they dominated their opponents. I just get tired in college football that there's not a willingness to have new blood. There's not a willingness, if you have one game and it ends up being a blowout, well, that team's a complete fraud. Why do we do this? Why does that happen in college football? I will never understand why this sport is that way. Just maybe understand, hey, bad matchup. Last night, Indiana went into a bad matchup. Notre Dame might be the best team in college football right now. And I think people are just judging Notre Dame based on they've always been the choke artist team and that they lost to Northern Illinois. But over the last, 3 months, that's probably been the best team in college football. They have been hammering teams, and they were on their home field. And I think that we get a little bit too caught up in logos and too much of the program prestige. It's got to stop. And this 12-team playoff era is an incredible thing. Now, I still want to see some tweaks on how the selection process is, how they decide on these teams. I wish there was more transparency on the criteria that they actually use to decide how they bracket the teams. And I think there would also be a better bracket if you reseeded this. And instead of giving the conference champions the first 4 seeds, have them just seeded, give them automatic bids, but have them in the first round home games. Give them a guaranteed home game, and I think you would have had better first round matchups and a better playoff overall. So there's still some tweaks, and there's got to be respect given to these other leagues as well. There's good football played everywhere around the nation, but there's so much pressure placed on in Indiana in that one spot. Like, if you don't perform, your program, your team this year was a complete fraud. And I just hate that in college football because, sometimes they're just bad matchups. And I do believe that Notre Dame is probably the best team in the sport right now. I think they're going to be the team that wins it all. That's my prediction right now with Notre Dame. I had them in my bracket to go win it all. And I love, though, that we get a chance to actually see it play out because I think back years ago, and I bring all this up, too, to bring back to BYU, 40 years ago on this date, BYU football took down Michigan to win the Holiday Bowl. Now, they weren't officially the national champion 40 years ago today. They had to find out a week and a half later when the AP poll and the coaches poll officially came out, and then BYU was officially deemed the national champion, being ranked number 1. But think about how the champion was decided 40 years ago to now. This is much better. And we got to continue just to evolve this thing. But I hate this notion that, it should just be all SEC teams. It should be 9-3 South Carolina, 9-3 Bama. No, those teams dropped the ball in the regular season. They don't deserve to be in. And so you got to value the actual results in the season. And that was one of the gripes, too, for teams like BYU, where no one was valuing how BYU played over the entire body of work this season. They went 10-0, or 10-2, excuse me. And the final month of the season was not pretty for BYU. It was not good football. And I'm not sitting here claiming that BYU belonged in this bracket because, honestly, they didn't. They dropped the ball in November, and that's the outcome they get. But up until that loss to Kansas, when that poach punt that will live in infamy just rings in the minds of Cougar Nation everywhere, up until that pooch punt, BYU is a really good football team. And there was not enough credit given to that fact that BYU was doing everything that was asked of them in front of the schedule that they had. And there's really good football played across college football in all of these conferences. And you're seeing more and more with NIL. If you want to be a player, spend, and you can get it done. And I like this era of college football. I know it can be draining with the transfer portal. We'll get updates on the latest on that with BYU and the player movement and how that can be a little bit frustrating for the traditionalists in the sport. But I feel like college football is in a better place than it's been as far as popularity goes. There's just got to be an understanding that, hey, just because your logo wasn't incredible 30 years ago doesn't mean you're not a good football team today in 2024. Or just because you get blown out in one college football playoff game doesn't mean your team, your program was a fraud this entire year and that you didn't belong in the playoff. Like, you went 11-1. I thought Indiana belonged. And just because they had a bad matchup against Notre Dame doesn't mean they didn't belong in that stage last night. So I get tired of this. I get fatigued from this narrative in college football. It's the only sport where I feel like this happens. Like, I've seen so many times a 3-14 matchup in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. 14 seed or a 15 seed gets hammered. Does it become this indictment? We can't have the CAA, the Horizon League champs, suddenly in this tournament because they lost by 30. No, it's just bad matchup, you got outclassed, and that's that. Whereas in college football, it's, well, if it's not a close game, we need to shrink this pool and only have 2 teams vying for the title. No, this was the perfect year to have 12 teams because no one is elite. I mean, you hearing me say Notre Dame might be the best team, I guarantee you a lot of you probably thought, you're crazy. There's so many arguments for so many teams in this bracket to win it all, and that's what's great about college football. And to have this align with the NIL and the transfer portal era, it's great stuff, and it makes for an incredible race in college football. I've never been more riveted by a college football season than this one because of everyone had a path. Games between Boise State and UNLV mattered for the first time because of this 12-team playoff. So I think it's a good thing, and I just hate that there's this narrative now because of these outcomes early in this playoff that, oh, we need to shrink this and have the 9-3, 8-4 SEC teams be in this thing. No, you got to still win your games, and that's got to matter. We're taking our first break. On the other side, we'll get to some BYU football transfer portal updates, and then coming up at the bottom of the hour, Carson Ryan, the newest BYU football tight end. He'll join the program to decide or discuss why he picked the Cougars right here on Cougar Sports Saturday.